Hi, everybody. Welcome to Untether.tv. I'm Rob Woodbridge, the host and founder. What you're about to hear is a keynote presentation from Untether Talks earlier this summer of 2012. This is Asif Khan talking about the death of geo. Asif is the founder and CEO of the Location-Based Marketing Association. He's also my co-host for This Week in Location-Based Marketing, another podcast on this network. But for now, you get to sit back and listen to Asif talk about the evolution and the de-evolution of geo.
All right. Well, glad to be here. Thanks for that introduction to Lord of Location. Wow. So I'm going to. Are the slides live? Have we switched over? No, not yet. They're coming. So I'm Asif Khan. As Rob said, I'm the founder and president of the Location-Based Marketing Association, a relatively new industry trade association. And we've been around now for about 2.5 years. And we're based here in Toronto, but we're international in scope. And so just one slide on us if you're not familiar. About 450, almost 500 member companies now, chapters in New York, San Francisco, Amsterdam, London, Singapore, Montreal, and growing all the time. And partly why I'm on the road so much is really bringing this message of the intersection of people, places, and media, because location-based marketing isn't only about mobile and what's happening in the mobile world, and obviously this conference is about mobile, but I'm going to try and get you to think a little bit outside of the box around how location that is provided to us, that data that's provided to us from a mobile device in many cases, actually empowers us to connect with all forms of media and people around us. And so my talk today is about what I'm calling the death of geo. And really what I'm talking about is the death of location as we understand it today, or the check-in or Foursquare that we heard earlier from Amber about, and then from Damien as well. And I'm not talking about this guy. I'm not talking about the first president of the United States, although he is in fact dead, and his name was George. But I am perhaps talking about this guy. And this is a picture of a old-time town crier. Some small towns still have this town crier type of concept. What I'm suggesting is that this idea of simply using location to find out about stuff around us in a social discovery or a check-in, I've checked into this small town and I find the restaurants around me. That's where we are today, but that is really just the tip of the iceberg. And because I'm Canadian, like hopefully many of you, I really think from a location-based marketing perspective, we're really in the first half of the first period of the hockey game. So there's a lot of game yet to be played. And so I'm going to share with you a quick video that we put together recently that kind of brings us to where we are right now around the check-in and the power of that. And then I'm going to quickly dispel that and kind of shift into where I think it's all going. So I think I have to click on the video to make it play. Here we go.
Location. We've all heard it before. Location, location, location. Since we're human, we want everyone to know what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and where we're doing it. And where I am right now is a very valuable piece of information. A few thoughts. There are over 1 billion smartphones in the world. 95% of smartphone owners look for location information. Half of them receive location-specific offers. 114 million use check-in services. In 2011, 48 million people accessed maps on their mobile devices. In just 2 years from now, 1.4 billion consumers will use location-based services. And who are we, these location-loving consumers? Our annual income averages $105,000. 49% of us have a college degree, and 21% have a postgraduate degree. How do we check in? Facebook, Foursquare, Groupon Mobile, Scavenger, GetGlue. Just how valuable is my location? When we check in at a store, 47% of us buy something mentioned by our friends on Facebook or Twitter. Half of us, check-in champions, go to a store only because we received offers on our smartphones. Nearly 3/4 of us would switch brands if we received special offers while out shopping. In 2010, $558 million was spent on location-based advertising. By 2015, $6.2 billion. But only a few companies have harnessed the power of place. Jimmy Choo launched a new shoe through Foursquare and increased store sales by 33%. Earwalk relaunched its classic sneaker through mobile-activated pop-up stores and sold out in a day. Cinnabon's check-in campaign increased customer engagement by 671% in 1 month. It seems so simple, doesn't it? And it's so easy to know my location. It's right here in my smartphone. So help me get to where I'm going. Or I'll just go with someone else.
So that's sort of a state of a nation as to where we are as far as how the general public, the retail community, the advertising community views location services today. When I walk into an agency for the first time and I say, what are you doing in location-based marketing? They usually put up their hand or respond by saying, you mean like Foursquare or Twitter or something like that. And that's an okay answer, and that's kind of, as I said, where we are today. But it's really just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot more that I'm going to share with you in terms of the power of location and where we're going. And so the deals piece is important. It seems to be, one of the drivers at the moment. And when we looked at the data in terms of location-based deals or incentives to get people to come into a store or to switch brands or those kinds of things that were alluded to in the video, about 13% of the people who are using location-based services, that is the driver today as to what's moving them into the store. And if I was to show you the same data from 3 years ago, it was 60 or 70% of the incentive. So we're already seeing a decline of the deal as the driver and a move towards content and other forms of incentive being delivered across location-based platforms to actually engage consumers. And the rationale for that is a lot of big brands, a lot of retailers who were the early adopters around this, companies like Best Buy and Gap and people like that, who were using Foursquare and using things, are starting to rethink their strategies around this. They're coming back at it and saying that Groupon phenomena of driving lots of one-time traffic doesn't work. And in fact, if you're the Gap, the actual conversation I had with the Gap recently was, well, wait a second, we're the Gap. Why are we partnering with Foursquare to drive traffic into the store? People know who the Gap is. Why are we helping Foursquare build their brand? And we're starting to have this kind of conversation now. So there's a bit of a rethink that's sort of devaluing the need to use discounting as a driver. What we have to start to think about is that the world is flat. And I think we know this, and the power of Skype, the power to communicate with people, even though I jump on a plane every week, for the most of us, we can communicate with people wherever we are. When you post something on Facebook today, it's both hyper-local and global at the same time, right? I post something, and then there's people all over the world that can see that comment and react to it and engage with me in that way. So the world is indeed flat. But we need this sort of paradigm shift in the way that we think about the world as marketers, as brands, in terms of how we're going to engage with people in the future. And my friends at Flash in the Can a few years ago put together a great video, and it's a bit old, but I love it because it illustrates the need to think differently.
Throughout history, mighty empires have risen and fallen. The Mayans, the Romans, and in recent history, this empire. MP S&C Worldwide, an advertising agency, but not just any agency. This was the last advertising agency on earth. At one time, this was a vibrant, thriving organization. But then one day, the people who worked here disappeared in an instant. Gone. This office has been preserved just as it was found after everyone vanished. We can even see what they were doing when that moment came. Filling in timesheets, getting another coffee, playing foosball. They were carrying on as they always had, ignorant of a great change going on all around them that would soon destroy them all. And this was it. The consumer, to whom agencies had force-fed their brand messages for decades, stopped being passive. This was the catastrophe. Because now the consumer could actually choose what they wanted to see, not what the advertising agency forced them to. But still, agencies like this felt invincible. So they ignored these changes and held fast to the things they knew, like this thing. And these things. And this. But most of all, they clung to this, the television commercial, even when clients begged for new, non-traditional ideas. So they simply repurposed their print ads into clever, rich media banners and glibly suggested that everyone have a Twitter feed. In agency after agency, the story was the same.
until at last not a single advertising agency was left. So much was lost because of arrogance and ignorance, and because they chose to ignore the changes going on all around them. But in the end, the reasons don't matter. What matters is there were people once in this advertising agency, then one day, there weren't.
Now, while that's a bit of a funny look at the advertising industry, and I don't know how many of you are in the advertising industry, but, whoops, I guess we're still going. I don't know how many of you are in that industry, but the reality is what it's really saying is we need to think bigger. We need to think beyond just the mundane and the everyday and serving our clients and delivering things just because the technology is there or just because others are doing it or being a Me Too platform. When we think about location, what we're really thinking about is a piece of data that we never had access to before as marketers, as brands, as platform developers. This is a new piece of data that just wasn't there. And what we need to be thinking about is, and in order to think about that in the future, I want to look back to the past. So this is a picture of Aristotle, and I titled this slide, A View from the Topos. And topos is a Greek word that we currently derive words like topography from, and it means place. And so what Aristotle said, and this is in 300 BC, he basically said that he defined place as a containing body in which it interacts with the things or the bodies that are contained within it. And that's how he defined place. And then he went on to say that a thing is really an object that exists within this contained body, and it can only move within that contained body, and it can't move without it. It's a lot of big words from a guy, many, many years ago, to really say that we need to think differently about the concept of a place. How many of you use Foursquare? Okay. How many of you checked in here today when you got to the Glen Gould? Okay. So pretty much everyone who uses Foursquare. So that concept of a place where there's a lat long, there's a building that we check into, it's okay, it's a good starting point. But the concept of a place that Aristotle's talking about and that I'm talking about today is really not a physical one at all. In fact, it really is about thinking about objects, things, people, media, everything being geo-addressable and having a geo-relationship with everything else. And that's really what he's talking about. One of the things that we do at the LBMA, because we're an industry association, is we do a lot of research. And we've been working in Chicago with the Department of Transportation and also in New York with buses, with digital screens on the side of the buses. And what we did was, as an experiment, is we took these buses with these digital screens, and instead of selling that media in the traditional way that you would buy that media based on the route the bus travels and potentially demographics it's hitting, we don't do that. In fact, what we do is when the bus stops at a red light and an intersection, we gather all the real-time check-in data from Foursquare and Facebook and Google and Banjo and everything else that's available to us, and we build a real-time aggregate demographic profile of the people who are actually there. And then we serve an ad into the side of the bus that actually matches who's at that intersection. And then when the bus moves, when the light changes and goes to the next intersection, we do it again. So what we're actually doing is we're delivering media now. We're delivering advertising purely in a contextual way, in a moving object, based on the actual people and the data that location data is afforded to us in that scenario. So what is a place? Well, today, or at the end of last year, a place looked like this. So it's based on check-in. It's based on Foursquare and Facebook and Yelp and formerly Gowalla, and now Facebook as well. And so there was about 102 million places that were mapped across these platforms. And they were accessed by 231 million people. And you see the number of impressions. That's 2011. Let's jump to 2013. So now we've got about 2.4 billion places. And it's because we're expanding the concept of what a place is. So when you start to factor in Wi-Fi hotspots, billboards, print billboards, digital screens, television sets, all of these things being considered as locations that we can engage with based on where we are and the data that results from that, we now have a whole different mindset around what is a place and how we define that. And if we advance this even further to 2016, now we've got 53,630,000,000 places. Because now we can start to factor in the cars that we drive that are all Wi-Fi enabled and are effectively sensors on the network as well, all the mobile devices, every app download, and everything else that's going on. As I said, every person, place, and thing in the future will be geo-addressable and have a geo relationship to everything else. location is this paramount piece of data that is going to be pervasive and across every single thing that we do. And it creates a big challenge for marketers. And the challenge is this, is that if you think about how we get access to location data today, there's these three rings that we look at the LBMA. The orange ring is the location determining technologies. So 90% of what we see in North America today, like a Foursquare app, is using the GPS in the smartphone to determine somebody's location. But we could also use cellular towers to triangulate your position. The carriers know where your phones are, otherwise they wouldn't be able to charge you. And then when we're inside of a building like this, we can use Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or other things like that to figure out where you are. And then if you look at that blue ring, we have all the media that exists in the world around us today. We have print and television and billboards and digital signs and radio and all that kind of stuff. All of which, I'm going to argue, can be made to be location-based if we can layer the data on top of it that comes from the orange ring. And then you have this green ring, which is the really confusing ring for marketers and retailers and brands today, which is everybody coming out with new platforms and services, from mobile payments companies to augmented reality companies to mobile coupons to SMS and mapping and everything else, all saying we're a location-based something. So it creates a lot of confusion in the world for people who are out there doing it. And yet all media, as I argued in that blue ring, can be viewed as location-based. When you look at this picture right here, who can tell me where that truck is right now? No. Any ideas? Look at what's on the side of the truck. Boston, correct. So what they've done here is they've basically taken a drink we all know, Maker's Mark, and they've put it into Boston speak, right? Maker's Mark. And they're basically saying, this is an ad that's relevant to the people of Boston because it's local and it's in the language and the way that they talk, right? It's a location-based ad. And I can argue a print billboard, any print billboard, whether it's on a moving vehicle or standalone, it has been a location ad from the beginning of time. It's only relevant to the people in front of it. Your home is a location too. So we have to stop thinking about location-based marketing in places just as the office that we check into or the restaurant we check into, but everywhere. And so when you think about your home, and you think about your living room, and you think about that television set that's sitting there, we have to start thinking about this as well. And Amber she mentioned GetGlue in one of her examples. And GetGlue and Miso and Shazam and all these guys are reinventing their platforms or inventing new platforms around how do we engage with people when they're in front of their television and layer location data on top of that. So taking the concept of Foursquare, a check-in, but instead of checking into a place, a lat long, I'm checking into content now, based on where I am. If you watched the Super Bowl this past February, Shazam was all over it. 1/3 of those $3.5 million TV commercials were connected to Shazam. And what does that mean? That means H&M, Toyota, Pepsi, all the guys who did it, while you're watching, just like Shazam can listen to a piece of music, instead now it listens to a piece of audio signal coming off of the television commercial, and it creates a call to action that reacts to it while you're there, whether you're in a bar or in your living room. And then it creates this response for H&M, which then drives traffic, incentive, offer, that starts in one medium, television, manifests in another medium, mobile, starts in one location, your living room, and moves you to another location, the retail store, with directions on how to get there from where you are now. It's about a layering of location data and a combination of media and layering those things together. The same thing that can happen in television can also happen online. Stop.at is the platform that you're looking at here, and effectively emulates the concept of Foursquare, except instead of checking into a location, now you're checking into a website or to a web page or to a Facebook page. And so as you check into these pages, you're being rewarded and you're earning points, similar to the gaming mechanics of Foursquare, except that we're talking about online now. And there's this role to bridge social and location as well. And so when you think about social and you think about location, for most part, most people, when you say social, they think Facebook and Twitter. And when you think location, you think Foursquare. But really what you need to think about is if you're a brand like a 7-Eleven, when I sit down with brands like this, I say to them, wait a second, how much money did you spend last year on growing the number of followers you have on Facebook or Twitter? And they put up their hand and said, we spent whatever. Everybody spent something if you're in this kind of a business. If you have retail locations or your products, or you have products that are sold in retail locations, or you're a restaurant chain, or you're somebody who has locations. And so when they put up their hand and say, yeah, we spent $200,000 on that, and now we have 200 million people who like us on Facebook, I say that's great. But do you know where those 2 million people are relative to where they can consume your product in real time? And they're like, what are you talking about? No, we don't. So this correlation between what's happening in social and what's happening in the real world in terms of where the people are that can actually consume those products, that has to be made. You have to start thinking about location as saying, hi, I'm here, and social as saying, hi, I'm listening. In real time, that connection has to be made. And that's really what brands like 7-Eleven are starting to do with what you see on the left is an ad that they're running on the Pandora radio platform in the US, pushing people to get Slurpees. And so it really is about combining data sets across different mediums and starting to think about location in a unique way. One of our members is Sony Ericsson in Europe. And I love what they did in terms of combining digital out of home, Facebook, with physical location. And I'm just going to play the video and let you consume it.
Sony Ericsson wanted to launch Xperia Ray, a new smartphone with a camera that takes great pictures in low light conditions. They asked us to drive interest for the product as well as help reinforce the position of the Xperia brand as the most entertaining smartphones. The time for the launch was one of the darkest periods in Sweden. It gets really dark. Really. And the darkness affects the Swedish people. In general, people aren't interested in technical specifications, so we had to demonstrate the technical features in a context that was relevant to the consumer. We challenged our brains to make people understand how well the camera really works in the difficult light conditions of late autumn in Sweden. Experts told us that the easiest way to defy darkness is to show someone else that you care for them. It's also been proven that caring for others affects yourself just as much. We made it possible for people to defy the darkness with the help of Xperia Ray by sending a big message to their friends and families, and we would capture the moment with the new Xperia Ray. To create the big message, we needed an iconic and exclusive place for showing it. We selected Stureplan in Stockholm, the most metropolitan place in Sweden. We made it easy for people to defy the darkness. Just type your name, write your greeting, enter where to send the greeting, either MMS or email, type your email or phone number. When the greeting was displayed on Stureplan, the new Xperia Ray took a picture, which was sent to your friend, who in turn saw how it was made possible. During the campaign period, we also had banners on one of the major news sites in Sweden, where you could interact directly with the campaign. You could do the same thing on Facebook, where your friends were tagged in a photo on your wall so everyone could see it. To kick off the campaign, we used the popular blogger Alex Schulman to promote it, a well-known local celebrity and a witty blogger with a Stockholm profile. Alex wrote the first greetings on the Stureplan screen and talked about it on his blog and his popular Twitter account. And the campaign generated a huge buzz online. But to get the most popular bloggers' attention, we created custom-made messages which addressed recent posts on their own blogs and their personality. And the work paid off. We reached a majority of Sweden's top 10 bloggers. The possibility to show your personal greetings on this massive scale became incredibly popular. During the short campaign period of 4 days, we achieved amazing results. 3,000 greetings. 399 people wrote, I love you to someone. 11 marriage proposals. More than 2 minutes and 40 seconds average time on the site per visitor. 23 blog posts about the campaign generating 4 million impressions, a total of 14 million impressions. We made it possible for people to understand how well the Xperia Ray camera works in low light conditions without talking about technical specifications and megapixels. And equally important, we made the day a little bit brighter for a lot of people in the dark Swedish autumn, simply by letting them show that they care for each other.
So you have a lot of things happening there. You have a physical location similar to Young Dundas Square. You have giant digital out-of-home screens. You have integration with social platforms like Facebook. You have people actually in the square interacting in real time with that screen using their mobile devices. And it's all empowered through being in that location and location data to make it happen. And why is that important? It's important because if any of you are out here and you're building mobile platforms that want to leverage location, you need to think about, I'm going to argue, you need to think about how you're starting to integrate this with other media and not mobile by itself. And why? Because 76% of total ad spend today is traditional media. 13% of the brands that we surveyed last year that are members of the LBMA are actually increasing their spend on traditional media. It's not going away. Television is here to stay, and it's going to be reinvented through things like Shazam and made more measurable and more effective. And so if 76% is traditional media, that means 24% is digital, but only 6 to 8% of the ad dollars today are going into mobile. And that means that you have Foursquare and Facebook and 10 million other people all vying for a piece of the 6 to 8% of the ad budget that is mobile. And if that is your starting proposition when you walk into the door of an agency or brand, you're basically putting yourself behind the 8 ball to begin with, as opposed to going and saying, let me show you how I can use this mobile platform to make your traditional media spend, that 76% over there, more effective and more measurable. And by connecting these mediums together, as you saw in the example of what Sony Ericsson's done there. And this crosses all media, right? We saw digital out of home, we saw television, and now radio as well. So when you think about platforms like Pandora in the US or Spotify or any of the satellite radio platforms or even local radio here in Toronto, CHFI or whatever it is, okay? The reality is that, let's go with that as an example, is that when you think about local radio and you think about that advertising that you listen to that's paying for you to get that radio while you're driving your car, the problem with that medium today is that we have a limited pool of available advertisers to us here in Toronto, if it's a Toronto radio station, that we can go and sell to that might be relevant to the core demographic audience that listens to that station. However, if we have the ability through technology and through location data to actually know where the listener is, if I know you're on the road and you're currently in Waterloo or London, Ontario, while you're still listening to CHFI, well then, why am I making you listen to an ad for Corey's on the Danforth, which is nowhere near Waterloo? I should be able to now sell ad inventory in Waterloo and London and other places as well. But that's only possible when you start to layer the data that comes off of location-based services and map that on top of how you go about selling radio. And certainly Pandora is all over this in the US. That's another Pandora ad for Home Depot up in the top right there. And search is being reinvented based on location as well. So what you're seeing here is Google Goggles Labs using location data combined with image recognition data. And so what happens here is I hold up my phone and using an augmented reality-like view through the camera of my phone, the search engine is able to determine in real time that I'm not actually in Paris standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. I'm in fact in Las Vegas standing in front of the Paris Hotel in Las Vegas. And how does it know that? It knows that because it has the location data of my phone and it's correlating that with images that it's seeing and then delivering search results that are purely based on the combination of those data sets. So when we think about location, and I think both Amber and Damien commented on this earlier, but it's not about privacy for the sake of privacy. It is about value and relevance in exchange for something that we as consumers want. These search results are relevant to me and valuable to me at that specific point in time, right? Do I care that you've used my location data in order to deliver that? Probably not. So it's not about privacy in that context anymore. It's about value and relevance. So the reinvention of search. And we are moving to a world, as I said earlier, where every person, place, and thing will be geotagged and geo-addressable and have a geo-relationship to everything else. It's a world when everything is connected. I'm fortunate enough, one of the things I get to do is I sit on a little committee at Chrysler in Detroit, and the mandate that we were given, the group was given, was to take the Microsoft Ford Sync system and use that as a starting point and project 10 years into the future about what's going to be happening in the car and where we are. And what's going to be happening in the car is a lot of things. So when you look at the top picture there, you see Google in the car. As I said earlier, every vehicle from 2014 model year on will be Wi-Fi enabled. Will be a connected vehicle on the network all the time, always connected. And so you have this ability to do searches. You're going to have augmented reality in the dashboards. One of the things that we're thinking about right now in this little group is while you're driving, your arm's sitting on that armrest and it's reading the blood pressure and it's feeding you data and delivering route information as you're driving along based on whether you're a diabetic or you're allergic to certain things and feeding in real-time allergy data from the weather network and all this kind of stuff, right? It becomes about how we start to combine data sets based on where we are. Everything will be driven off of not just the who, which is all the demographic information, but combined with the where. And that is really about the power of location and where we're going with these things. So there is I describe it as a new big bang. And it's a big bang that's coming between the intersection of people, places, and media. So it very much is about us. And there is a lot of information that's being put into the world about who we are and what we like and what our friends like and where we're going and all that kind of stuff. And that's certainly the world of the current location services today, being married up with demographic profile. It's about the places. It is about buildings and locations, and I don't want to discount that at all in terms of physical locations and lat-longs. But it's also about media, and we need to start thinking much bigger about television and billboard and radio and digital out of home and print even, and how all of those things are going to be reinvented and delivered in an experiential way to us as consumers based on hyperlocal relevance and hyperlocal value to who we are. And so I'm going to end with this video from another one of our members, and I apologize if you've seen one of my presentations before. I like to end with this video because I love what they've done in terms of how they've combined physical locations in the form of retail stores with pushing an actual revenue-generating service, so people actually making money for a change. How do you like that idea? And combining that with real-time location data, SMS, proximity-based SMSs, and a whole bunch of cool technology. So this comes from our Singapore chapter, a company called StarHub, which is one of the carriers, or I guess the #2 carrier in the marketplace. So they're both carrier, television provider, and they also run their own music download service, competing with iTunes. And that's really what this project was designed around. How do we launch a music download service? How do we make it relevant and make it unique and get people on board and build a new fan base for this? So I'm going to play this video because it really challenges the concept, as Aristotle talked about way back in 300 BC, about what is a location, what is a place. It's not just a building that we're in.
There's one thing on you. Now this was a loner, lovable stoner. He lived in a bluebird, spelled his name backward. He's so pretty, he always looks straight. Born on a Monday, such a very good thing. I haven't seen a pupil in his eyes for 16 days. The Catholic girls love him in the 100 million.
So what is a location? It's a fitting room. It's anywhere you are, and the ability to engage with you and use that data. And I don't know the last time you ran a campaign with an 84% click-through rate if you're an advertiser, but it doesn't happen, except for when you can deliver experiences, and it's all about experiences. It's all about, we used to talk about content is king, content is king. And the content is really important. You have to create great and valuable and interesting content. But in today's world, in the location world, that content has to be combined with experience. We have to deliver it in a way in which it's engaging and makes people talk about it and creates social magnification where we want to share it with other people. And that's when you get 84% click-through rates. So phenomenal stuff. A future without location is not possible. We are going to move to a world where we're not checking in anymore, and the check-in just becomes passive, where we're just always checked in wherever we are. Privacy doesn't really exist, so I'm going to disagree with both Amber and Damien in that context. I think it's important to give people the semblance of a thought of privacy, but it doesn't really exist. Geofencing is going to be the way of the future. Mobile payments, NFC, near-field communications, augmented reality. I don't know how many people have seen the Samsung Beam. Anybody tried that yet? No? Samsung's got a phone called the Beam. You know, screen real estate's a problem today. You know, you got these little phones with small screens. Well, great. Guess what? Every smartphone from here on in is going to have a built-in projector. I can walk up to any wall and project on and have a much bigger screen. That's what the Beam is. Or I can project into the air and have augmented reality around me. So all this kind of stuff is coming, and we're going to be able to take over, you know, transit bus shelters and be able to use them to, you know, when we're in context to them and our phone's in front of them, and do all kinds of crazy things. So it really is a world that everything is location-based. Geo, in the concept of check-in, is absolutely dead, and long live location. Thank you.